Okay, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly since this is basically a review. I just want to make sure before you actually turn in your paper, you are aware of how to be quoting and paraphrasing and summarizing properly. All right, so when you use when you si introduce a source, use a signal word or phrase. So something like according to noted primatologist Jane Goodall. Uh, that lets the reader know these are Goodall's thoughts. It also tells reader she is a primatologist. So since you're writing about nature or about apes, the fact she's a primatologist gives it some more weight. Always begin with your first introduction of a source with the first and last name. After that, just use the last name. I Be careful of specific signal words. They can add to the impact, but they also could uh, have you being less than objective if you use the wrong one. So in here, in Job Shift, consultant William Bridges worries about de-jobbing. The worries, when he later says argues, are very specific words. And as long as that actually reflects the state of mind of your source at the time of the source was writing, then you're fine. But if you're using those words and the source was just mainly stating a fact, then you really can't say that. All right, quoting is your repetition of exact words. Now, the reason for this is to maintain clarity of the sentence, or you want to reveal a weakness in the passage, or you plan to discuss the implications of the passage. You really shouldn't be quoting that much in any research paper unless you have one of these main reasons for using a direct quote. Additional reasons you have the wording is memorable. It's just incredibly well written sentence or sentences or passage. It's a respected authority supporting your ideas, and therefore you may want the authority's actual words. Or the author is challenging or disagreeing with others in a field, especially if that author is going against the general beliefs of the field and is being something of an outlier. So that's when you may want to quote directly. All right. So the quoting for authority, clarification, make sure it's in context because of controversy or because it's eloquent. All of that is what you want. Now, quote exactly and in context, and don't interpret. And when you're interpreting, make sure you do it fairly. Don't misconstrue what the person said. Don't use an improper lead-in verb, like don't say so and so argued when so and so is just making a statement. Make sure you always acknowledge your source and keep separate your ideas and words from the sources. And don't overuse. Quote just when it's needed. Just quoting in order to take up space within a paper to make it easier to write never works out well for you. All right, when you're taking notes, write down whether it's extending more than 2 pages, your quote. Make sure you copy carefully and accurately. Label where and how you might use the quote, and then place it in quotes. Don't rely on your memory to remember that it was a direct quote, not just a paraphrase. When you use the quote, introduce the author and follow with your own commentary. Use square brackets if you introduce new words or change anything in the quote. And then use ellipsis marks if you omit material. Now, when you're integrating, begin with acknowledging the author. Inform the reader of this fact, and then give any needed background prior to the quote on the author or the source. And vary the lead-ins. They don't always have to go at the beginning of the quote. You can put it in the middle or at the end. And add more information that's needed. Give an explanation always of why the quote's in there. I mean, don't just throw quotes down and expect the reader to have to figure out how it's supporting your claim. Always explain how that quote supports your claim. Again, if you're changing anything, you use these brackets like you see here around the word brackets. If you're going to change to the original, then use the brackets. If there's any explanation, so emphasis is mine. So sometimes you'll see that in a work is that somebody's quoted somebody, and part of the quote is italicized, and so you will say the emphasis is mine. It didn't come like that originally. If you need to correct something, like maybe the quote has a grammar mistake and you correct the grammar mistake, then you need to put that in brackets because you changed it from the original. And if there's something, a grammar mistake, and you don't change it, put SIC next to it. And that way you don't get hit for the grammar mistake. Now, when you delete a section of quote, use these three dots, this ellipsis. You don't need to use them at the beginning if you remove a section of a quote from at the beginning of the quote, unless it changes the meaning. If the meaning is changed because you've done that, then you do need to put the ellipsis. If it's within that you've taken out a chunk within the quote, like in the middle of the sentence, use the ellipsis, and always at the end use the ellipsis, and then use a period. So you actually have four dots then, because the ellipsis is three, and then your period is actually the fourth one. Okay, paraphrasing. This is what you want to use most of the time, because the readers want to hear your words. So your purpose is to make yourself the main speaker. You're paraphrasing because you want to clarify the original. It may not have been as clear as it could have been. You want to add some of your own style to it, or you're just extracting the main points, and so you don't need the whole quote. You just need the main points. Make sure the central idea has not been changed when you paraphrase. Don't have your paraphrase be saying something that the original didn't say. Make sure all the sentence structures and the vocabulary are yours. Don't just change one or two words. That isn't paraphrasing. Change everything. You don't use quotation marks here. Still give acknowledgement to your source, however. All right. Avoid plagiarism. Always use words unless the original has no accurate synonym, right? Or if it's function words such as in, prepositions in, to, articles, the, a, and. Always rearrange everything. All right, summarizing is just condensing of a text. So keep all the main points. Make sure you don't change the author's. Identify the source. Add commentary when the summary is significant to your argument. Include enough info to recount the main points, but only what you need. And make sure you always use your own words when summarizing. All right. With all of this, tie the quote, the summary, the paraphrase back to your thesis, to your claim. How does it support it? Always explain how your source supports your paper. All right, that does it. Hopefully, that's a good review for you. Like I said, I think you knew all this already. Just giving you a quick review before you turn in your paper.